Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. And today we're going to be taking a road trip with Roger Zelazny. Yes, we're getting on the road of adventure, and we're traveling down that dusty highway, and we're seeing where it goes. Because today we're talking about the book Roadmarks by Roger Zelazny. I'll put a photo of the cover of it up over here so you guys can take a look at it. Now, I don't have a physical copy of it. I've been trying to find a physical copy of it for the past several months. And I always prefer to get my books out in the wild, out in the open at a bookstore rather than over the internet. And try as I might, I've been unsuccessful in running down a copy. So I had to I had to resort to an electronic copy of the book from my local library, which I just finished yesterday. And I'm going to give you guys here the review of it on the channel. Now, what brought this book to my attention originally was an outstanding video by Richard Rempel over on his channel, Vintage SF, which I will link his video down below, on this book by Roger Zelazny, who's one of my favorite authors of all time, quickly catapulting to the top of my author list. And I knew I wanted to run down this book and read it, which I've done, and now I'm going to give you guys my impression of it here on the channel today. So what is Roadmarks? It was originally published in 1979 by Del Rey. It's 185 pages in length, has an excellent cover painting on it, a wraparound cover painting by Daryl Sweet that is just wonderful. It attracted me to the book right away. I wanted to use it here in some part on the thumbnail for the video as well. And the original title, the title Roadmarks, is actually not the original title to the book. The original title to the book, the working title to the book by Zelazny, was Last Exit to Babylon, which actually works its way into the cover painting over here. And in my opinion, that is a far superior title to this book than Roadmarks, which I consider to be a rather unfortunate choice by the editor. The editor also did a couple of other changes to the book, which we'll get into here a little bit later in the structure of the chapters, which is quite interesting. But what is this book about? This book it's your prototypical Roger Zelazny in that it is a blend of high fantasy and science fiction, leaning a little bit more heavily on the science fiction end this time. In other words, it is classic Zelantasy. Zelantasy is a term I like to use in order to describe that blend of high fantasy and science fiction, which is so typical of Roger Zelazny. But this book starts off with our protagonist, our hero, who is Red Dorikin, who's driving his beat-up pickup truck down this dusty highway in an Arizona-like environment, and you quickly realize that he's on a very unusual road, because the road that he's on can go forward in time into the future, all the way to whenever and wherever you want on planet Earth, or it can go back in time depending on which direction you're driving. And there are exits and byways all along this road where you can get off to go to any location on planet Earth at any time on planet Earth, and even into some alternative realities. And Red Dorikin is looking for something that he has lost along this highway, this travel along the highway of time. And he doesn't know exactly what it is. He doesn't know if it's a person, a place, a thing, another alternate reality that he's looking for, his origin. He doesn't know. He just knows that he has lost it and he is searching for it. And that's the first driver that you've got going here for the plot by Roger Zelazny. The second is that this road is actually governed and ruled by a set of guidelines, a set of laws that are enforced by a police department out of the 25th century. Now, they're very loose laws. They're more like just sort of general guidelines, and they're very loosely enforced by this police force from the 25th century. But under these guidelines, a former business partner of Red Dorikin, declares a black decade upon Red. And what the black decade does is it allows this business partner, Chadwick, in order to make 10 attempts on Red's life. And if he makes these 10 attempts and Red survives, then Chadwick, the business partner, can make no further attempts upon his life. It seems like a very unfair number of attempts to be allowed on a person's life. 10 seems a bit excessive, but that then becomes the driving catalyst here for the plot. And you have a story that's going forward that's told through the perspective of Red Dorikin, and it is told through the perspective of these various assassins that are hired by Chadwick in order to kill Red. And they are from all different times of Earth's history and even from some alternate realities. They're very varied and they're very interesting to read about and they're very well written. And in a nutshell, that is the story, the plot line here to Roadmarks. And that's about all I want to talk about. I don't want to give too much away about this book, but it's an interesting construction that Roger Zelazny has done here with this book and how he organizes the chapters. And we need to discuss this because it's very unusual. There are only 2 chapter numbers throughout the entire book. You have chapter 1s and you have chapter 2s. And these just repeat. You get chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 1, chapter 2. And what Zelazny did here that is very unique, it's very original, very imaginative, is that all of his chapter 1s represent a linear storytelling that is taking place on the road, usually through the perspective of Red Dorkeen. So whenever a chapter is titled chapter 1, you've got linear storytelling going on, linear in terms of chronological time, and it is taking place upon this fantastic road. All of the chapter 2s are non-linear and are taking place off of the road in some other place, some other when, and some other where. And they can be arranged in all different orders. They're actually random. They're literally random. So what Zelazny did is after he finished writing the 1s and the 2s, all these chapters, he took all of his chapter 2s and he put them into manila envelopes, stacked the manila envelopes up, and then he just shuffled the envelopes around into a completely random order. And whatever order that they were in is the order that he then inserted them in between the chapter 1s, the linear storytelling, so that you got this feeling of these time travel, of going back and forward at just random and sort of these time paradoxes in this very unique and this very chaotic fashion that you would experience if you were traveling down a road that you could get off at any exit and be anywhere at any time. And it's brilliant, but it did create a little bit too much confusion. And they had events that were basically at the conclusion of the book, and the editor's like, this is just too much chaos. We have to rearrange a couple of these chapters and put some where they need to go towards the end of the story. And Zelazny doesn't tell you which ones specifically got rearranged. He does mention this in an interview, how he constructed this organization for these 2 chapters. But I can tell that there was one chapter that definitely got stuck down at the end, dealing with a cybernetically controlled Tyrannosaurus Rex that is one of the assassins in the Black Decade. And that's the book. That's the story. It involves time travel, sentient books of poetry, copious amounts of smoking and drinking, alien death machine robots, dragons, and one beat-up pickup truck. And it's very interesting. It's an entertaining novel here. Now, it's very different. What I found to be very interesting about this novel, what impressed me about it by Roger Zelazny, is just it's a demonstration of his absolute versatility as an author. It is very different from his other books. Allow me 1 second here to pull those down. All right, I have the books. So Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light is just a very dense, very crunchy science fiction novel that he wrote that is an absolute work of genius. And then you go from that to the Chronicles of Amber, which is just straight up pulp adventure fantasy. And from there, you've got Roger Zelazny writing The Dream Masters, which is just pure new wave science fiction from the 1960s. And Roadmarks is none of these. It's completely different. It's in a completely different tone and tenor. It is a Zelantasy, but it reads very much like vintage science fiction out of the 1970s. It's something that could have easily been written by Robert A. Heinlein, Clifford D. Simak, or Joe Haldeman. In fact, it is very, very similar, in my opinion, to Clifford D. Simak's writings. It's very Simakian in nature, if you will. And so it's very unusual in that perspective. And it just impressed me again with how versatile that Roger Zelazny is as a writer, how good of a writer and a wordsmith that he is. So what do I think of this book? How good is it? Well, if I had to rank it, if I had to rank it in with those other 3 books that I just mentioned, it is not as good as The Lord of Light. This is an absolute work of genius. It's a very demanding read. It's a very crunchy read, but it's not as good as The Lord of Light. It's not as good as the Chronicles of Amber, which are absolutely one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. But I would say that it is better than the Dream Masters. The Dream Masters has some beautiful descriptive imagery in it, but it has a lot of issues with the plot and the continuity. In this book here, Roadmarks, Roger Zelazny, the pacing is excellent. The story moves along. The characters are very good. They're very engaging. And you have just very crisp and very curt and dynamic dialogue that moves the story forward. But he tried to pack too much into this 185-page novel, in my opinion. He had too many subplots going with too many too many supporting characters in order to really do it justice. He would have been better served to peel off some of those subplots or expand out the novel to 250 to 270 pages in order to fully and appropriately explore some of those subplots. And so he didn't leave himself enough room to maneuver, enough room to expand upon these ideas that he was getting into this otherwise very excellent book. If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 7.5. It was entertaining. Now, if you've read Roadmarks and you have an opinion on it, put it down in the comment section below. I would love to hear it. And also just one last thought on Roadmarks is that they did change that title back, if my memory is serving me correctly, in a collection of the collected works of Roger Zelazny. I think they retitled it back to the working title, Last Exit to Babylon, which is far superior to Roadmarks. I really think that's a very unfortunate title. If you've got an idea that would have been a good title for this book here, Roadmarks, an alternative title, put it down in the comment section below. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. And I will leave you guys with one thing. On Tuesday, I am going to do a book haul video, which I don't normally do. But unfortunately, a certain Dark Lord of BookTube has declared war upon the peace-loving peoples of BookTube and has been launching attacks via book hauls. And it demands a response. It demands a blow for freedom. The counteroffensive will be launched on Tuesday, so tune in for that one. But with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, and I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time.